On the Ad Hoc Committee on Gang Violence and Youth Development will now come to order. We have one item on the agenda. If anybody wishes to make comment on this item or make general public comment, please fill out a card at the back of the room and give it to the gentleman to my left, and we will hear your testimony. First, we'll start with item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor and CAO relative to extending the grant period for the U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistant Fiscal Year 2006 Congressional Mandated Grant Award 2006-DD-BX-0352 in connection with the development of a new gang reduction and youth development zone in Baldwin Village and related matters.
Good morning.
Good morning. Melissa Fleming with the CAO. As stated, the Mayor's Office is requesting authority to extend a grant period for the 2006 Congressional Mandated Grant Award to include the period of July 1st, 2006 through June 30th, 2009. The award is $987,228 to fund the Gang Reduction Youth Development, or GRID Zone, in the Baldwin Village area. We recommend authorizing the grant extension through June 30th, 2009, authorizing the Mayor's Office to execute a professional services agreement with the county for the period of December 1st, 2007 through November 30th, 2008, and instructing this office to include continuing resolution authority for a Detective 2 and Sergeant 2 within the LAPD for the next fiscal year.
Okay. And the positions you just mentioned about LAPD would be paid for by the grant?
The positions in LAPD for most of the GRID zones are paid for by the Supplemental Law Enforcement Service Fund. It's a state block grant that's provided solely for law enforcement salaries, and the salaries for those individuals would come out of that fund.
Okay. And any status on the state budgeting process and that those funds? As far as we know, they're still alive for the next fiscal year?
We do anticipate them to be still alive. I know that the amount was going to be different next fiscal year, but
I think
I'm unsure
everybody's
about
taking
that.
at least a 10% cut or something like that.
Right, something like that. I'm unsure of the total amount.
Yeah. Well, the legislature's not done with the process, but the mayor did come out with his May revise on I think it was the 14th of May.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another indicator perhaps of what it may or may not be in jeopardy. But at the most, I can't imagine that they would be signaling anything more than a 10% cut when it comes to law enforcement. Social service is another story.
Right.
Law enforcement very rarely gets cut. Okay. With that, now the total budget for the GRYD zone in Baldwin Village, just like the rest, doesn't just come from federal grants, right? It's a complement of general fund as well, and
That's correct. In addition to this amount, I'm aware of part of the money in this grant, for example, $400,000 is devoted to community-based organizations to provide intervention services in the area. As I said, $400,000 provided in the grant. I know an additional $100,000 has been dedicated from the general fund to make a total of $500,000 for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is this grant renewable?
Potentially, yes. I know the congressional mandated grant awards rely on a member of Congress to sort of sponsor the grant. I'm not sure about the process, but I do know that there is the potential to receive this particular grant again.
And is this something that Congress does year to year, or they try to do it every 3 years, or as far as the renewing of the funds for these purposes?
I believe it's yearly, but I'm unsure.
Okay. If you could report back to this committee, we're going to hold this item over. I'd like, the reason why we need to know that is we need to understand all sources of funds. What are the, we don't control Congress, obviously, but what is the custom and practice, and what mechanisms have to take place or be enacted in order for us to depend on applying for and receiving these grant funds again. Apparently, the mayor's office feels confident and comfortable that the GRYD zones are a way of the future, and if this is one of the sources of funding, we need to try to figure out how much how much we can expect to depend on the sources that we're going to be utilizing in the coming budget year.
Right, and I know the mayor's office is looking for additional grant funds as far as this one and other ones, but
Absolutely.
they would
Yeah,
know
that
more
goes without
information
saying.
about which
Like I
particular
said,
ones they're looking for.
We can't control Congress.
Right.
We can only have certain custom and practice or that we can depend on, certain expectations. But like you said, all too often, a particular member of Congress needs to sponsor it and shepherd it. Somebody may leave Congress, the champion of a certain type of funding out of Washington might dwindle or go away when that person leaves, et cetera. So if we could get down to the details of who seemed to be the individual that was sponsoring or who was considered the champion of these kinds of funds. Was it attached to a particular chairmanship, meaning the name may have changed, but that committee seemed to be the sponsor, or was it an individual? I would imagine that's the kind of information that would be readily available just looking at the records. And or was it something that was started under a certain presidency and luckily it folded over into the next, or was it started by this presidency, which makes me a little nervous because this president is termed out. So regardless, we're going to have a different president. So if we could get down to understanding how this grant came about, at least in recent history. If it started 50 years ago, I don't need to know what happened 50 years ago. But at least let's figure out what's going on in relative terms of the politics and or the policy that has been forwarding these monies to cities like us, at least most recently. Okay. All right. So it seems to be renewable, but obviously by actions of Congress, it continues to flow or not. So with that, I did speak to Jeff Carr from the mayor's office, and they would like to comment on this and report on this as well, along with another item we'll be putting on the agenda next week. So with that, what we'll do is we'll hold the CAO report over till next week's meeting, and then we will continue the report with those details. And so far, so good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is anybody else here to comment on item number 1? Item number 1 is open for public comment. Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 1 is now closed. With that, we'll open up the committee for general public comment. Is anybody here to make general public comment to this committee? Seeing and hearing none, general public comment is now closed. With that, this committee is now adjourned. Thank you.